Welcome to Mr. Investor Real Estate Dojo. Today's topic, today's lesson, today's session is all about strategies to monetize subject to deals. Okay, we talked a lot about subject to. Now I'm going to teach you how to monetize, how to bring it all in, put the money into your pocket. I'm going to explain to you two ways how to monetize a subject to, okay? The first thing you could do to make money off a subject to is called retelling. Retelling it. And what that means is that you're going to focus on selling it to an end buyer. Who's an end buyer? Who's our audience? Somebody that cannot get a loan. Somebody with bad credit, self-employed. Somebody that's close to FHA but still needs a little bit more time, okay, to become more seasoned. Okay, that's the end buyer. So when you retell it, you're looking for end buyers. And two ways to structure a deal with these end buyers is one is assignment of contract. Okay? The second way is to do a wrap. And I'm going to explain both of these to you, okay? And how to close these deals. But just remember, for right now, the first way to monetize on a subject to is by retelling it to an end buyer, somebody that doesn't have great credit or cannot get a loan, okay? But they want to own a property, they have the down payment, they could afford the monthly payments, but they just can't get a loan right now, okay? And the way you're going to structure the deal is two ways to a retail buyer. Is one through assignment of contracts, and two, a wrap. You're going to choose one or the other, okay? Depends on the property, depends on the situation, depends on the motivation of the seller, depends on the loan, the interest rate, the fair market rent value. So there's a lot of different things involved in it before you know which is your exit strategy. But the way you structure the deal with retailing, there's only two ways. You could do assignments of contract, or you could do a wrap. Now I'm going to go ahead and talk about both of these, but I want to go ahead and talk about assignment of contract at first. Now, we've talked about what an assignment is before, but I'm going to go ahead and talk to you a little bit more about it, okay? An assignment of a contract is basically you negotiate the deal with the seller, you put it under contract, and you sell your positioning to buy this deal to a new buyer, okay? That's it. You just sell your positioning. You have a vested interest in the property because of the contract, and you just sell the contract for a fee, okay? Now, the good thing, one of the main reasons I like assignments is that there's less liability for you as the investor because you don't get to own the property. Okay, what I mean by that is your name or your company name does not come in the chain of command. Okay, the chain of title. What that means is that you don't get the deed in your name. You're just assigning the contract. The new buyer is going to the closing with the seller, and you don't never show up at closing, okay? So you never get the deed. The new buyer gets the deed, okay? And that is a good thing because it decreases your liability. When you assign a contract, there's two ways to basically close the deal. One is assignment, just straight up assigning the contract. The other way is to do a double closing. All right. Now, a lot of people understand the assignment of contract as AKA mortgage assignment, and that's exactly the same exact thing. You're just assigning the mortgage to the next buyer, okay? So assigning of contract for a subject to is the same thing as a mortgage assignment, okay? So you're assigning to the new buyer. So you could do that two ways. You could do assignment of contract, or you could do a double closing. And basically an assignment of contract, the new buyer gives you some money, it's called the assignment fee, And usually it's the down payment, 10 grand, 20 grand, 5 grand, whatever it is that you're asking for, and that money goes into your pocket, or the assignment fee for assigning the contract, okay? The advantage of an assignment is that we already talked about in other videos, but I'll go ahead and quickly explain it, is that there's low closing costs, okay? The bad news is that not that many civilian buyers or retail buyers understand all this assignment stuff, and they're more hesitant to give you 10 grand, okay? All right. Another advantage is you don't have to go to the title company. You know, you get paid for the assignment of the contract, you as the investor moves on. The other way you can structure the deal with assignment of contracts of retail, when you're retailing the property, is to do a double closing. And with this, there's more expenses because there's more escrow fees. But the advantage is that the buyer and the seller are not going to know how much money you've made, okay? So if you think the buyer or seller are anal, or they're picky, or they're going to get jealous because you're making money, then you want to structure the deal in a way that they don't get to see how much money you make, okay? So whenever you retail a property, you're retailing to end buyers, people that don't have great credit. And then there's two ways to structure the deal, is basically to do an assignment of your contract or do a double closing. On a double closing, the bad news is that the title is going to come into your name, and then you're going to give it to somebody else, which means that you will have some liabilities for the title and the ownership transfer, okay? Now, that was the first way to make money with subject to how to monetize. What subject to is to retail it to an end buyer. I personally don't like to do this that much because for many reasons. The first one is that it's a lot of work, okay? But everything's a lot of work, guys. And if you're willing to do it, you're gonna make money. I just prefer not to retail to end buyers because I hate dealing with end buyers, okay? They're not sophisticated, they need me to hold their hands, and you know, I'm a very, very busy guy. I don't have time for that, okay? Now, if you're not in the same situation as I am, if you don't have 3 companies to run, if you don't have 100 things going on, then yes, go ahead and retail to end buyers. You're gonna make the most amount of money. Retail buyers are gonna pay you top dollars, okay? They're civilian buyers. This is their dream home. They're willing to give you the most amount of money and the profit's there. But at the same time, there's more time involved, and I don't care. So I'd rather not waste my time, okay? But you should, okay? Or you can if this is an exit strategy for you. What I like to do with these subject twos is, personally, I like to buy subject twos and turn them into rental properties. That's what I do. Okay, so the first way to make money with subject to is retailing it. And we talked about how you could retail. You could do assignments of the contract or mortgage assignments, okay? Assignments. The second way was a wrap. Now, a wrap is very cool because now you become the lender and you're able to make money out of no money, out of thin air, okay? Now, the bad thing about a wrap is that you're becoming the middleman, and so you have a lot of responsibilities and liabilities, but on the other hand, that's why you're able to make more money. And with the wrap, there's 3 phases of revenue generation, okay? And I'm gonna explain all this to you, okay? So, but just understand, whenever you do a wrap, the deed comes to you, then you sell it to a retail buyer, end buyer, okay? So you're on title. You know, when somebody does a search, they get to see that you had bought that property, okay? But the good news is that there's 3 profit levels when you do a wrap, okay? Now, what is a wrap? A wrap is whenever you buy a house subject to, okay, and then you wrap the existing financing, add some extra interest, a higher purchase price, and you wrap it to a retail buyer that cannot get a loan for a higher price, and you collect on the spread. Okay, from the monthly payments to the asking price to the interest rate. So you're collecting on the spread. And the great thing is that you're not having to deal with being a landlord because you're just carrying the note, okay, the IOU. You're like the bank. And the retail buyer, he or she's going to be responsible for all the maintenance of the property, okay? Now let's talk about how the wrap works and 3 levels of profit margin with a wrap. Okay, this is very important. There's 3 ways to make money on a wrap whenever you sell at retail. Okay, so the first way that you can make money on a wrap is the down payment. Okay, the second way you can make money is on the monthly cash flow. And the reason this happens is because let's say I buy a house from a motivated seller and their existing loan is 5%. Then I turn around and sell that same exact note for 9%. So I'm going to make 4% interest off money that I didn't even have, or off of money I didn't even invest. Okay, the previous lender invested in it. Okay, so dude, that's the great thing, and that's why you're able to get the monthly cash flow, because whatever the interest rate is, you're going to add a few points on top of it, which is going to cause you to have a positive cash flow to the monthly. So the 3 levels that you're going to make money off of on a wrap is 1, the down payment, the monthly cash flow, and number 3, your exit cash out. Okay. Now some people call this the back end cash out. I like to call it the exit cash out, but it's basically the same thing. So your back end profit is, let me explain this to you, but I'll go ahead and put numbers into it. But let's say you bought the house for 80, and whenever you sell it to a retail buyer via owner financing, you sell the property for 100. See, the difference is the 20, and that's called your back end profit. Does that make sense? All right, let's go ahead and put some numbers into this and help you understand how does a wrap work. Okay, so we're talking about wraps, and we're talking about strategies to monetize with subject twos and selling to a retail buyer. Okay, so this is for a retail buyer. Okay, we could do assignments or we could do wraps. And now we're talking about wraps, and we're talking about 3 ways to monetize on a wrap, and we're going to put some numbers into it. Okay, so I meet a seller, and he's a motivated seller, and the house is worth 100. Okay. The seller's debt, or the seller's loan, is 80K. Okay? So I tell Mr. Seller, hey, I'd love to buy your house. I'll buy for what you owe on it. The seller agrees to it. Okay? Now, once I have this house, I start marketing this house. And when I was speaking to the seller, when I told him I'll buy his existing house for $80,000, he told me that his monthly payments on this house was $800 a month. Equals PITI, which is principal, interest, tax, and insurance. So I buy the house for 100K. The house is worth 100K. I buy the house for 80. The seller's monthly mortgage, monthly payments, PITI, is $800 a month. I start advertising this house to a end retail buyer. The same house I sell to an end retail buyer for 120. Remember, I bought it for 80. I'm selling it slightly above market value because the seller does not have good credit, and therefore they're willing to pay a premium for this house. Okay? Because there's existing loan. So the end buyer here is really more interested on the pre-existing financing. That's what really intrigues them, because they want to own this house, but they can't. So they're willing to pay a little bit more as long as they get a loan in place already. So in this situation, I create a win-win situation. I sell this house to the end buyer for 120. Okay? Now, there's 3 levels of profit level. Number 1, we talked about, is the down payment. I'm going to ask this end buyer to give me $20,000 down. So the first way I make money is the down payment. In this case, it's 20K. All right? And then when I sell this house to the seller, I tell the seller, hey, the interest rate that I got was X. Your new interest rate is X plus 3. and therefore your monthly payments become $1,200 a month. And as you can see, my monthly payments were $800 a month. And if you subtract the difference, I'm going to have a spread of $400 of positive cash flow a month. So what happens is that I sell this house to the buyer for $120. The buyer needs to give me $20K down, which is the first level of profit I'm going to make on a wrap deal. Then the second way I'm going to make is monthly cash flow. And on this specific transaction, I'm going to get $400 a month for the next 30 years, or whatever the term was on the note. And the greatest thing is what I call the exit profit, or the back end profit. And the back end profit is going to be $100,000 minus my original loan, which I promised the seller that I would make his payments for, which is $80. So my end or back end profit is another $20K. Okay? So what happens is, in 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, when that buyer gets a new loan from FHA or Bank of America, what have you, or a conventional loan, and they cash out my note, I'm going to get $20K at the end of that closing. I've already got $20K up front when I sold the house to the buyer, and then on a monthly basis I got a cash flow from the spread. And that spread came because the seller's mortgage interest, let's say, was 5, and when I wrapped it around and sold it to a retail buyer, I charged that retail buyer 9% or 8%. And the difference is the monthly cash flow, which in this situation was $400, which means I got $400 in my pocket. Okay? So in a nutshell, whenever you do a wrap, you have 3 levels of profit coming in. One is a down payment. The second is the monthly cash flow. And the third is the back end cash or equity. Okay? You get the down payment up front from the buyer. You get the monthly cash flow because of the spread of the interest rate from the underlying note compared to what you wrapped it around, which is going to be at least a couple of points more. And then you get the back end. You bought the house for $80, you sold it for $120, and whenever the buyer cashes you out, the difference between what you sold it for and the balance is yours as the back end equity. And that's why I love wraps, because with the wrap, you're able to use OPM, other people's mortgages, to make a lot of money, to become a lender without your own cash. Just like the banks do. You know, the banks are able to magnify for every dollar deposited into their account, and they're able to lend out 9 times more, sometimes even more, 19 times more that amount. So every dollar they receive, they're able to lend out $9, $10, okay? So that's how they're getting so rich. And with the wrap and a subject to structure, you're able to become a lender and lend money in a sense without even being your own money. You're using OPM, other people's mortgages, okay? Not other people's money, but other people's mortgages to create wealth for you, okay? Which is a very, very ingenious idea, as long as you're willing to go work hard and being honest and do what you say, okay? It's very important that you do what you say. If you made a commitment to the seller that you're gonna make their monthly payments, you gotta do that. You gotta do that, you know. You gotta be a man or a woman of your word, okay? In this business, it's all about your word, your reputation, okay? So now what we talked about is one way to make money from subject twos with retailing it to end buyers. And then there's 2 ways to do that, through assignments or through wraps. When you assign it, it's fast and quick, it's very low risk, but you make little money. When you wrap it, it's a little bit higher risk because you become owner, or you get the deed in your name, but you make more money because you get money as a down payment, you get money as a monthly cash flow, and you get back end money. So if you're looking to build wealth, then you want to wrap it if the situation allows, like if the interest rate is good, if the PITI of the seller is below the fair market value, things of that nature. Okay, so basically the deal is going to determine which strategy we use. Sometimes we have leverage and we can decide which one we want to do. But if you want quick cash, assignments, if you want to build monthly cash flow, build wealth, control the asset, okay? You don't have to control the asset just through deed. You can control the asset via note. Whenever you do a wrap, you're still controlling the asset without the plumbing repairs, without renters calling you in the middle of the night, okay? You're just like the banks of America. You know, you don't deal with any of the plumbing. You just collect on the monthly payments. If the buyer defaults, you call your trustee. They put the house on the auction, and you wash and cycle and do it over. You find another end buyer, you get their $10,000, $20,000 down, and you do the same thing over and over and over, okay? So it's a really good strategy, and this is how you retail a property with subject to. Now, let's talk about part 2 of how you can monetize subject to, because part 1 was retailing it, and we just talked about it, okay? Now, part 2, how can you monetize if you don't want to deal with retailers like I do? I don't like dealing with retail customers. So the way I do it, or the way I like to do it, is I wholesale to investors. Okay. Why do I like this method? Because it's quick, it's fast. I'm dealing with professionals. I'm dealing with people that understand assignments, and they know what they're doing. And as long as the deal is good, as long as there's a lot of meat on the bone, they're gonna eat it up. It's gonna create a win-win. They're gonna win. I'm gonna win. The new buyer's gonna win. The seller's gonna win. And it's in and out, all day long. I'd rather hit at one base every day than strike out, guys. Okay? And so this is where it is. If you retail property, you're gonna make a lot more money, but it's a lot more work. Okay? And I'm not scared of hard work, but I'm just letting you know how the cars fall. Okay? If you wholesale, it's a lot faster to investors, but you get less money. For example, the same deal that we're talking about that I bought for 80 and sold for 120. If I retailed it, I could have got 20K down. That same deal, if I wholesale it, I might only be able to get 4K, 5K. Why? Because I have to leave enough meat on the table for the other investor. Okay. So the second way to monetize on subject twos is one of my favorites. Is basically I wholesale to investors. Okay. Now, when an investor buys a subject to deal, what can he or she do? Well, many different things. If they're like me, they buy and hold property, subject to, okay? And rent them out. Other investors may buy it and do owner financing and carry the note and sell it to a retail buyer. Other investors like fix and flips. They'll, instead of buying a property, you know, that's worth $150,000 cash, instead of paying 50K, maybe the seller is willing to do owner financing or do a subject to, and you don't have to pay 50K cash, okay? You pay the seller a couple of grand in their pocket, and you just leave the underlying note there. You rehab the property, and then sell it in 2 or 3 months, and then cash out the loan. So there's a lot of ways to structure it, okay? So when you sell to a wholesaler, he or she may have many different exit strategies, from renting it out, buying and fixing and flipping it, doing owner financing. But the good news is that they know what's going on, and they're willing to give you quick cash for a good deal, okay? And so in a nutshell, 2 ways to monetize on subject to deals is retailing it to an end buyer, somebody that doesn't have great credit, or wholesaling it to an investor, which then he will go and retail it, or he will fix and flip it, or he will just sell it traditionally, or he'll just rent it out, or he'll owner finance it, or whatever his exit strategy is. But as long as you leave enough meat on the bone for this investor, you should be able to move these properties quick, okay? There's a lot of investors that love subject twos. I am one of them, okay? Now, let's talk about 2 ways that you can sell to this investor. Once again, you could do assignment of contract. the fastest way. This is the way I like to do with most investors, okay? Now, some investors may be greedy. You know, they might have a problem if you're making 20 grand. I don't have a problem if you make 20 grand, guys. If you bring me a deal and you bought it for $1 and it's worth 100 and you're going to sell it to me for 60 and the numbers work for me, man, I'm going to take my hat off of you because you just made 60 grand and you're a great hustler, and I'm going to try to talk to you and learn how you negotiate that deal, okay? But some other investors, if they see you make 60 grand, they're gonna get upset. You know, they're gonna get their panties crossed. You know, I don't want to be sexist, but they're gonna get upset. They're not gonna be happy. Okay. So in that sense, you're gonna do strategy number 2. You're gonna do a double closing. Okay. Now, I don't like doing double closing with investors because it just costs more time, it costs more money, and I like dealing with people that are happy that I made a lot of money. As long as I'm leaving them a lot of meat on the bone and they're going to make a lot of money, they're happy. They're not trying to squeeze me for every penny that I made just because I got a good deal. If the numbers work for you, Mr. Investor, then it should be irrelevant what I paid for it, okay? And that's my theory. But unfortunately, not all investors have that mental attitude. My mental attitude is this world has unlimited amount of resources. So I don't care if there's millions of competitors, there's enough for me. As long as I'm focused on doing what I got to do, good for you. The harder you work, the harder it makes me work. So my mentality is there's unlimited amount of resources. Other investors may have the mentality of there's so little out there and I have to hold it all in. Okay, so it all depends on who you like to deal with. When I do wholesaling, I like to deal with investors that don't care if I just made 20 grand, don't care if I just made 2 grand, don't care if I just made 50 grand. As long as they're happy with the deal, once they see my paycheck, they're still going to be happy. So I like to do assignments. But you might come across investors that are going to be mad at you because you made a lot of money, even though they're going to make a lot of money, so you want to do a double closing. So what am I saying? When you do wholesaling, there's 2 ways to close a deal: assignments and double closing. Alright guys, this is Mike with Mr. Investor with the Real Estate Dojo. Go out there. I've just shown you $1 million strategy to buy properties and make properties and sell properties and become a lender, almost like a lender with no money, with OPM, with other people's mortgages. Okay? Don't just sit there and just watch and watch. Go out there and take actions. Action is the key, guys, in any business, in any hustle, in any mission, in any goal. Action. You got to be Action Jackson, okay, guys? You got to take more action than you study, okay? Because when you take action, you're going to learn. When you just study, you're just going to have more confusion. You're going to have more questions without the answers, and you're going to seek out for more information and get more answers and then get more confused. But when you take action, okay, there's less confusion because you're learning as you're going, and you're connecting the dots and you're making them make sense for you mentally. So be Action Jackson. Go out there and take some action, okay? Stop worrying about making mistakes. Make as many mistakes as possible. More mistakes, the merrier, guys. The more mistakes you make, the closer you're going to be to success, closer you're going to be to your mission. So don't listen to the naysayers. Go out there and make it happen for yourself. This is America, guys. This is Mike with Mr. Investor. See you on the next lesson.